Hi, my name is Sarah Kirk, and thank you for joining me today for our presentation, School Counselors as Leaders, Advocates, Collaborators, and Agents for Change. How school district leaders and administrators like you all can partner with school counselors for student success. I am so glad that you have taken the time to join me and to learn more about how you as our school leaders can partner and utilize your school counselors in order to have the best outcomes for our students, which is of course our end goal. Like I said, my name is Sarah Kirk and I am the school counselor specialist at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. A little bit about me. I won't go into all of this, but I was a school counselor for 9 years before I started at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. I was in Norman Public Schools and also Tulsa Public Schools, and I absolutely loved my school counseling experience, but I have been so grateful and so honored to be able to take this position at the Department of Ed to help train and lead our school counselors statewide. Just a little bit of my background. I do have intensive training in trauma informed and PBIS, MTSS, responsive classroom, conscious discipline, restorative practices to discipline, and also child light yoga and mindfulness for children. I went through a training to get certified to do that type of training with students as well. I also, went too fast. I also am a really strong believer in advocacy and in the role of the school counselor. I'm on the American School Counselor Association Board of Directors, and I listed my contact information there. Please do not hesitate to reach out. I'll share it again at the end as well. All right, so just a little bit about our office at the Department of Education. We are the Student Support Office. There are currently 26 of us that are employed to support students and of course to support all of you. You can see there in our mission statement what it is we do. We really focus on that academic development, alternative education, college and career readiness, social and emotional learning, and family engagement are our big bucket items. But we really see ourselves as a resource to schools, to families, and of course, our students. We are led by Dr. Shelley Ellis, and we are so grateful for her support. We're so grateful for Superintendent Hoffmeister's support of our office. We were just 2 people when Superintendent Hoffmeister took office, and as I said, we've grown to 26. So we're super grateful and honored to be able to continue to grow and continue to support Oklahoma students. And because of our growth and all of the exciting happenings, I wanted to share just a couple of things that you might be interested in that are happening in our office. And this is just a few that I'm a part of, but there are many, many, many things, exciting developments happening. What I'm most excited about and that I have worked a lot on is the Oklahoma Comprehensive School Counseling Framework. And we're going to talk about that today. That framework is scheduled to be published this summer, so hopefully just around the corner. And that will be a really extensive, comprehensive approach to what school counseling should look like in all of our schools, pre-K through 12, rural, urban, suburban, all of our schools, virtual. We've really tried to make sure it's comprehensive and it meets the needs of our Oklahoma students. So like I said, we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. We're also working on social emotional learning competencies with a companion implementation guide. These will be statewide SEL competencies based in the CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, based on the CASEL competencies, but really, again, targeted for our Oklahoma students. We're excited about these and about the implementation guide that will really show our schools how to implement SEL school-wide, not just from the school counselor, not just here and there, but really integrated into our work in the schools. couple of other things coming, a suicide resource guide for Oklahoma schools. We're really excited about that. Should be published soon as well. We're also working on a comprehensive school crisis management framework. I also want to plug right there that we have the CRRT, the crisis response team training, that it can be offered to your schools free of charge, and that will go with that crisis management framework. So they really go hand in hand, but we can offer some really great crisis response training to your districts free of charge if you're ever interested in that as well. I actually just went through that training and it was phenomenal. I definitely recommend all school districts crisis team go through it. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. And more. That is definitely just a piece of it. I hope you know about some of the other things, such as all of our ICAP initiatives, our bullying prevention initiatives, our family engagement, and of course, Ready Together Oklahoma, which is the OSDE's framework and extensive resources to support schools as we look at what the fall looks like, as we all schools could start to return, and we help to fill those learning gaps and meet our students' individualized needs. That Ready Together Oklahoma resources are amazing. So make sure you check those out as well. So lots of exciting happenings. I just wanted to give a little plug to all of that because all of those things will really support your work as school leaders. All right, so now let's hop into today's presentation. As you know, we're here to talk about that collaborative partnership between school counselor and principal. So we will start with a summary, but also a little bit of a deep dive into the role of the school counselor to make sure that we're all on the same page about what that role should be. Then we'll also talk about the evolution of school counseling. We found that a lot of school leaders don't know about the changes that have happened in the profession. So we'll discuss that, the training and education of your school counselors, appropriate and inappropriate duties, the benefits of a comprehensive school counselor and school counseling program, and then also the things that we see as barriers to getting those really comprehensive, strong, data-driven programs up and running. So we'll talk about some of those barriers we see as well. Then, like I said, we will talk a little bit about the new comprehensive framework that is scheduled to be released this summer. And then we'll talk about how you as a school leader can help your school start working towards that comprehensive school counseling program, and also your role in that work towards comprehensive school counseling. I realize that that's a lot, and I'm watching my time over here because I know we don't have a ton of time. And so I will try to, like I said, do a deep dive by also keeping us rolling. And like I said, if there's anything I go over quickly, please reach out with questions. That is what I'm here for. Okay, so let's start with that role of the school counselor. Like I said, that has really evolved over since about the 1990s, but it's been a slow evolution. And so sometimes here in Oklahoma, we're just now seeing some of that evolution, and some school districts are really still right in the evolution, and that's totally okay. But I just like to cover this so that we understand that maybe what you once thought of a school counselor is not wrong. It's just continued to evolve like so much of education. So historically, it was the term guidance counselors that we used to refer to counselors in the school setting. Maybe you have heard that, maybe you still call them that. That is a term that was used historically to describe that role, but it's not just the name that has changed. What school counselors do is also different from what guidance counselors did. So guidance counselors of the past were really seen as reactive. So when an issue occurred, they responded. Everything was really reactive and not so much preventative. Also, guidance counselors of the past really just served some students. I love to ask people if they remember their school counselor when we get to be together in person, because so often the answer is no. And that's because the guidance counselors of the past did not serve all students. They maybe served the ones that were college bound or the ones that needed additional support, but it wasn't seen as this school-wide program for all. Guidance counselors in the past didn't do a whole lot of data collection. Their decisions weren't based on data. Like I said, it was more reactive to problems that popped up, services to some who needed it, but there wasn't a lot of data. And when it was measured, it was really just feelings and perceptions. Did you feel like your guidance counselor helped you? Those kind of data collection tools, but not that really strong outcome data that we use now to show our impact as school counselors. And then school counselors or guidance counselors of the past were not integrated into the school process. They were kind of seen as their on their own island. They were separate from everything else, and they often worked in isolation. So as we've seen guidance counselors evolve into school counselors, what we see school counselors of today, the scope has really changed through this evolution. And even though we still hear guidance counselors sometimes, we hope that even if they're called guidance counselors, their role looks more like this, because this is what we know is most effective. And that is proactive. So really, like I said, being preventative, proactive, ahead of the potential problems so that hopefully there are less of them, driven by data. So we're not just doing things because it sounds like a good idea. And instead, our decisions are really based in that data. Again, it's a program for all students. So we're not just targeting some students. This is really meant to be for all students. School counseling fits that MTSS or RTI triangle so perfectly because we want all of our services to be for all students. And then we look at those tier 2 and tier 3 students who might need additional supports. But our proactive preventative programs are meant for everyone. And then, like I said, it's data-driven, really measuring the outcomes. So that achievement, attendance, behavior data, what is the difference in those areas because of the school counseling program? So we really try to focus on outcome data and not as much on perception data. We still definitely love perception data. It can tell us a lot, but we also want that outcome data to make sure that we're making a difference on student outcomes. And then, like we said, it's no longer working kind of on your own island and serving some students. Instead, school counselors of today are an essential role in the school improvement process and really seen as school leaders. We'll talk more about that as we go on, but as school leaders, you all, and as district leaders, your school counselor can just really be your partner to lead different initiatives, especially things like if you're a PBIS school or an MTSS school or those types of tiered supports for students. Like I said, the school counselor is a great person to help lead that work, and their work can be integrated so smoothly into those different processes. And now school counselors of today develop, manage, and evaluate their comprehensive school counseling program. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the new framework. But you'll often hear me talk about a comprehensive school counseling program as opposed to just a school counselor. And even if your school only has one, we like to refer to it as a school counseling program, because a school counselor can kind of be that umbrella that helps initiate different programs and different initiatives and different interventions and all these different school-wide supports. And the school counselor might be over some of those, but may not be the only one implementing them. My favorite example is when I was a school counselor, I had a mentor program and a check-in, check-out program. And both of those were under my school counseling program, but I wasn't doing the mentoring and I wasn't doing the checking in and checking out. I had other volunteers and other educators in our school that were serving in those roles. So even though I was a lone school counselor, I had a school counseling program that was supported by people beyond just myself. And that's the best way, of course, to serve all students. So you can see here that evolution has really shifted what that role looks like. And if you look at this list and you think, my school counselor does the top list, or I always thought that top list is more of what the school counselor should have done. Again, you're not wrong, because there's lots of textbooks and research out there that described the role like that. It just was 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago now. And so we really want to focus on that shift towards that bottom list. And that's because like those links there at the bottom, and you can click on those in your PowerPoint. But those links show that there is quite a bit of research to support that this evolution matters and the outcomes are better when we are allowed to be true school counselors like that bottom list. There's also research to show that just the change in name from guidance counselor to school counselor, even if we don't look at the roles changing, just the change in the title, school counselors are perceived as much more effective than guidance counselors. And that research has been done with educators, them saying, if they perceive the guidance counselor or the school counselor as more effective, but also they did the study just at a mall, I think in Ohio, and random people at the mall perceived school counselors as more effective than guidance counselors. So the title matters, the role matters. We really want to work on this shift towards school counselors of today. So popping back to what the role is, we've kind of talked about what it's not anymore. So let's talk more about what it is that we want our school counselors to be doing in the schools. So we have this broken up into a couple of different areas. And I first want to talk about the domains. So school counselors are trained to really focus on 3 domains: academic, social and emotional, and college and career. So often, maybe at the elementary school, people think of the social and emotional. They don't always think of the academic and the college and career. Or maybe at the high school, it's the other way around. And you really focus on academic and college and career, but not so much on social and emotional. But true comprehensive school counseling focuses on all 3 domains, pre-K through 12, because we know that's what our students really need. And that academic domain can look like improving grades, improving attendance, increasing academic skills, organization, time management, study skills, all of those different things. The school counselor is really uniquely equipped to help with those academic skills. Of course, social and emotional, I think that's the easiest one to understand. And so social emotional learning skills, behavior, life skills, mental health supports, maybe school climate kind of falls in there. Definitely, school counselors are definitely well equipped to focus on that social and emotional domain. Again, pre-K through 12. I get told all the time by my high school counselors that they don't get to focus on that domain, and they wish they did because they know their students need it. So don't discount that, even if your area is at the high school or even the middle school. And then that college and career piece, same thing. We want that pre-K through 12. Of course, it looks different in our elementary schools than our high schools, but we want some of those self-discovery pieces, the career exploration, the just being presented and engaging with different college and career options starting young. We want that exposure piece. I always say students can't be what they don't see, and often they don't see it in their homes. So we need to give them opportunities to see those different college and career options. And of course, as you get into middle and high school, that might look more like future planning and college acceptance and financial literacy, scholarships, financial aid, that piece. But we definitely want to focus on all three of those domains, pre-K through 12. And that's not just because we think it's important, but we hear it from the workforce all the time. Our students need all three of these in order to be successful beyond their time with us. And so we know school counselors are so well equipped to make sure that each of these domains is taught for all students. Also in school counseling, we like to define our role as in these 4 themes: advocacy, collaboration, leadership, and systemic change. So I won't spend a lot of time because I know you know what these are, but when we think about advocacy as a theme of school counseling, it's really important that we see it as us being advocates for the role, making sure that we are helping others understand what it is we are equipped to do and what it is that we can do within our schools and our communities, but obviously advocating for the student as well. We really see school counselors as such a unique part of the educational team that can be that real advocate for what's best for that student. Because they have knowledge of each of those domains, they come as a really good resource to any sort of conversation about meeting student needs. Collaboration, again, we talked about this in that evolution slide, but it is so important that school counselors are considered a really vital member of your educational team so that they can provide their expertise and their knowledge in collaboration with principals and teachers and special education and all those other really important elements, but the school counselor can't be left out of that. Also with collaboration, a neat part of the school counselor, this kind of goes with leadership, but school counselors can really collaborate with teachers about building safe spaces for students, putting behavior interventions in place. I think back to my time as a school counselor, I was constantly collaborating with teachers about what we could do because this student was struggling with paying attention in class, and this student was coming to school really tired every day, and this student, all the different things that they come to us with, but I was able to be a collaborator with the teachers and come up with some great ideas to support those students. And like I said, that kind of goes along with that leadership of making sure you're utilizing your school counselors as leaders of different committees and different teams. School counselors are so well equipped to help with school climate and creating a sense of safety and welcoming and inclusivity and all of that if they're given the opportunity. So, when I talk to you all as the school leaders, don't forget that your school counselors have that ability to partner with you. And when we say leadership, we don't mean making the school decisions or evaluating teachers or anything like that. That's your role. But we mean really helping to build a strong school and to make a better school, a safer school, a more welcoming school with better outcomes. And that school counselor is so well equipped to help you with that. And then systemic change. School counselors are trained to be agents for change, to see gaps and work towards closing those gaps. Like I talked about, we know how to look at the data and see holes in that data and work towards closing that for all students, not for just some, but for all. And that's really important. So make sure that you keep that in mind as well. We'll talk more about these components as we go. That's a little more getting into the weeds of school counseling. That triangle, or I guess it's a square, talks about these components as well. And they're really integrated into that comprehensive framework that I said will be released this summer. But I just wanted to mention this so that you understand that school counselors are trained to first define their school counseling program, to then manage it. So that's when you really start making those goals, planning, just the kind of behind the scenes piece. Then, of course, delivering those direct student services and indirect student services. The indirect student services are making sure we don't forget about that collaborative piece. It may not be face-to-face with a student, but it is definitely student services and definitely necessary. And then we assess, we look at what we're doing. Is it working? Is it not? What do we need to change of our program, of us, the whole thing? So this really shows that school counseling is not just responding and reactive like guidance counseling was. School counseling is really planned out, thought out, there to meet the needs of students. And like I said, data driven. We're not just doing things because it looks cute and sounds fun. We're doing things because our data shows us that the students need it and that we are here to serve all students, not some students, all students. All right, so let's pop into training and education now. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to go over it because I found that not everyone understands just how uniquely trained our school counselors are. And I think if we understand this, then we know how to better utilize them in our schools. So all school counselors have to have a master's degree or higher. We see that most school counselors come to us with two different types of master's degree options. There's a specific school counseling master's degree, or there's a more broad counseling master's degree. And the more broad counseling degree means that they're able to be a school counselor or like a licensed professional counselor in a private setting or in a community counseling setting. These types of programs range from about 33 credit hours to 60. Those specific school counseling degrees are usually the ones that are closer to 33 or 40 credit hours. And then the counseling that includes the ability to be a licensed professional counselor have to be 60 hours. And internships range from 60 to 600 hours. Again, those counseling more broad counseling degrees require more, closer to that 600. But both degrees include a really robust training in counseling techniques, theories, ethics, multicultural competency, data, interventions, really that mental health and education side. And that is what is so unique about the role of a school counselor. We are trained educators, but we're also trained mental health professionals. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost. And so making sure you utilize that school counselor. I often say, even though we know how underpaid educators are, often how school counselors are being used, they're actually overpaid for that. Because if your school counselor is doing data entry or schedule changes or, those very secretarial type positions, so important, so necessary, but not what your master's degree with potentially a 60 credit master's degree and 600 internship hours should be doing. They're way overqualified for that and, overpaid, because we could have someone with support staff doing that type of job. So we want to take someone who is this trained, this educated, and really make sure that we're utilizing them correctly. So let's talk about what that means. What is utilizing them correctly look like? So there's this chart that popped up there on the right side of the screen, and then it's linked here as well, so you can get to it as well. But I love this chart because they have created appropriate and inappropriate roles. But if you'll look, it shows how to make the inappropriate role appropriate. So let's look at this one. I think it's the fourth down. Signing excuses for students who are tardy or absent. I have been asked to do that before. So I had to sit at the front of the school and give tardy slips. Well, like I said, I was a little overpaid and a little overqualified for that job, but I worked with my administrator and we figured out how to make it a more appropriate counseling role. And I started doing really quick one-on-one check-ins with those students who were tardy or absent a lot and checking in on what was going on. And we were actually able to decrease our tardies really substantially by just asking some questions. But when I was in charge of giving the tardy slips, I didn't have time to ask the questions because I was just trying to get the slips out and get the kids to class. But our secretary started doing that. And then I started being able to have some of those more intensive conversations to help fix the problem. That's what I was trained to do. I was also able to get some community resources involved because we figured out that some of them had to do with transportation and some other issues. So we were able to flip that inappropriate duty to a really appropriate duty. And then our data improved, our outcomes improved because our attendance got better. So this is a great chart to be able to not just see what's inappropriate, but how can I make this an appropriate duty? How can I make this where I'm really utilizing my skilled, trained school counselor in the right way? So I hope that that is helpful. I also linked here a document about the role of the school counselor that can be really helpful. It's a pretty short document, kind of a summary, but really great role sheet that explains what our school counselors are trained to do. And like I've said, they're trained to be a vital member of that educational team, that mental health and education side. They've got both pieces that they can provide. But when we are spending all of our time with those inappropriate duties on that side of this chart, then we know that our student needs are going unmet, because as much as we wish we were, had 40 hours in a day and could do it all, when we're spending all of our time doing those inappropriate tasks, then it's just impossible to do the appropriate ones. And then again, we know that that results in our students' needs going unmet, which our whole goal is to meet our students' needs for all of us. This list, just so you know, is based on school counselor training, their expertise, and on research of what research shows what outcomes work. And so we know what school counselors have to be doing for outcomes to improve. And that's what this list is based on. So I wanted to make sure you didn't think that this list was just created by someone who thought the things on the left side sounded more fun than the things on the right. It's certainly not that way. It's based on that intensive training, the school counselor's expertise, and most importantly, research. So as we wrap up talking about the role of the school counselor, I want to spend some time talking about the benefits of a school counselor when they're able to do what we've talked about today, but then also the barriers that prevent school counselors from doing that. So I love this quote here that says, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I really see that as the evolution of school counseling. There was a time when guidance counselors just pulled people out of the river. And believe me, there are times as a school counselor, I felt like that was what I was doing, and it didn't feel very effective, and it probably wasn't very effective. But when we have the opportunity to switch the roles to true comprehensive school counseling, then we get to go up the river and see what's going on and stop them from falling in from the beginning. So I love a good alliteration. So I have described these ways that benefit school counseling in a good alliteration fashion. But we like to say that this redefines roles. So like I said, it redefines school counseling from what guidance counselors of the past did. If we feel like we're putting out fires all the time, if we feel like we're putting on Band-Aids all the time, but never changing anything, then it's not true comprehensive school counseling. So we've got to redefine the role. And when we do, then we get to be preventive, we get to be proactive, the role is redefined, and the students win. Comprehensive school counseling, when done right, also determines direction. Like I said, we're not just doing things for fun. We're doing things because the data tells us to. And when the final destination is known, we know what to do to get there. But if we're just doing things for the fun of it, then we're not following direction. We're not setting goals. We're not doing things to reach those goals. Comprehensive school counseling also creates collaboration. Like I said, school counselors are not meant to work in isolation. Comprehensive school counseling is designed and implemented to be in collaboration with administrators, school leaders like all of you, our teachers, our students, caregivers, community partners. All of those people are such a vital part of that school counseling program that I've talked about. When school counselors think they can do it all, that's when we burn out. That's when needs go unmet. It takes the true team. And I hope as school leaders, you are starting to see how you can be a really important part of that team with your school counselor. If you aren't already, you probably already are, I hope. But when we all work together, and we know that it takes a village, but we know when all of our unique skills are brought together, of course, again, the students win and their needs are more fully met. And, oh, I accidentally clicked on, hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. I had clicked on the link and I hope you all click on the link, but I didn't mean to click on the link. Oh, it's still wanting me to click on the link. Okay, well, I'll show you this since it keeps coming up. The next benefit is that there are bountiful benefits. We know the research supports this work and supports comprehensive school counseling. And this document that it kept wanting me to show you all is empirical research studies that support the value of school counseling. So it is some summaries of research studies, but shows, and it's broken up into the 3 domains of academic development, college and career, and social and emotional, and shows that the outcomes show that school counselors make a difference. The benefits are there. So be sure and check that out. And the data is really extensive and in a lot of different areas. We've seen outcome data that shows improvement in reading and math achievement, decreased discipline referrals, improved school climate, increased attendance. All of those different really important outcome goals show to improve when true comprehensive school counseling is in place. And then also some other really great outcomes for the school counselor. Burnout is decreased when they're able to do what we're talking about today. Job satisfaction and retention improves substantially. We just know that both the student and the school counselor are better off when we allow them to do real, true, comprehensive school counseling, as we've talked about today. There's that document linked to it that I just showed you if you want to check it out later. All right. So let's talk a little bit about those barriers, what it is that keeps us from doing this, because I hope that what you've heard in the last 30 minutes or so has shown you that this is good stuff. This is what we want in our schools. So if we know that's there, what is it that keeps it from happening? Why aren't we all doing this? And I collected some data. It's been about 1.5 years ago now. So this was pre-COVID. This was before some of the difficulties of virtual learning and everything that came with COVID. But we surveyed Oklahoma school counselors and we found some really big areas of key concerns that they stated kept them from being able to really implement comprehensive school counseling and serve all students' individualized needs. And what we found was almost all school counselors said these same few areas were their big barriers, and there's 5 of them. So we'll go over each of them. The first one is high caseloads. Without a doubt, school counselors with high caseloads have a harder time implementing comprehensive school counseling and meeting their students' needs. I think that makes sense. If we have too many students, it's hard to be proactive. It's hard to be preventative because we are being reactive because there's just so many of them. The recommended ratio is 250 students to 1. In Oklahoma, our average, this data just came out actually like a couple of weeks ago, and our ratio is 411 to 1. I really hope this number is going to decrease because I keep hearing about more school leaders and more district leaders understanding we need more school counselors, especially in response to returning from the COVID crisis. And so I hope that we see this data when it's released next year at this time go even lower. But unfortunately, while our average is 411 to 1, I would be interested to know what your ratio is. And if we were in person, I would ask. But what I have found is a lot of our schools, it's really varied. I've talked to lots of school counselors that say they have 800 students just to themselves. And then we have some that are closer to the 250, 300 recommended ratio. So it's really varied in our state. And for those that are well above 400, quite honestly, it's just really hard to do what I've talked about today. So if your school counselor has over 400, it's probably going to be a big barrier to what we've talked about today and for them really to be able to be effective. So that is definitely a big barrier. Another barrier that school counselors listed, many school counselors listed as what keeps them from implementing comprehensive school counseling is that their administrators and other school leaders don't understand the appropriate role of the school counselor. And it makes sense. They're not trained in this. You all aren't often trained in school counseling, which is why I wanted this opportunity to talk with you all today. The other barrier that is often listed is that the school counselors don't receive training on the ASCA National Model, which is what we've talked about today, that comprehensive school counseling, evidence-based model. So they don't receive training in it, and so they don't know how to implement it. And then the fourth barrier that is very often cited is that school counselors are really often required to do those non-school counseling duties. So we talked about that chart on the slides, a couple slides before this. And when they're asked to do a lot of those non-school counseling duties, like I said, they're just not able to do their true job. And then when you add things like testing coordination, a lot of lunch duty and car duty and recess duty and covering classes when teachers are out, all of those things, of course, keeps school counselors from being able to do their true job. And then the last barrier often cited is that people without school counseling degrees are filling school counselor positions. And we'll talk more about that and actually each of these barriers in just a minute. So we, as the Oklahoma State Department of Education, have created the new Oklahoma Comprehensive School Counseling Framework, and we are super excited for it to be published. It is going to be a game changer. We've really never had anything like this in Oklahoma, so we're super excited to be able to provide this guidance to school counselors, but also to you all as school leaders, to district leaders, to all stakeholders to make sure we understand what school counseling can and should look like. So the framework defines school counseling programs that are based in data, like I've said a lot of times, delivered to all students, like I've said several times, that include a developmentally appropriate curriculum. I haven't talked a lot about that, but it's an important piece of comprehensive school counseling. You know, we see math standards and math curriculum and social studies standards and social studies curriculum, but often school counselors aren't told what to taught, and they're often not given the time to teach it anyway. And so our new framework will have student mindsets and behaviors that all students need to learn. And we'll also share some ideas about what kind of curriculums can be used to teach those mindsets and behaviors. And that's really important. But again, school counselors need to be given the time to teach that curriculum. It goes beyond just purchasing it or just picking a curriculum. We must give them that time, direct student services so that they can do so. And then our framework also guides school counselors in the development of programs that close achievement and opportunity gaps. Like we talked about, school counselors are equipped to use systemic change to close those achievement and opportunity gaps so that we're meeting the needs of all students. And that goes hand in hand with that data-informed decision making. And the result is that we see an improvement in student achievement, attendance, and discipline, which again is our end goal. And that's what comprehensive school counseling can do when it's done right. And that's what our framework will show school counselors and administrators how to do. So we're super excited about that. It's going to be, like I said, just really innovative, really big step for Oklahoma. And I'm just so excited that our students will get to be the recipients of better school counseling programs. I'm watching my time and I know I'm getting short on time, so I'm going to run through this super quick. You have this slide if you want to read it later. And like I said at the beginning, this is getting a little more into the weeds of school counseling. You probably don't want a master's degree in school counseling in this hour we have together, but this goes back to that national model that we talked about that's research-based and that defines, manages, delivers, and assesses comprehensive school counseling. So we teach school counselors how to use each of these components to create a comprehensive school counseling program that looks like what we've talked about today. So I won't go through all of these components, but I just wanted to include this so that you understand comprehensive school counseling is really detailed and it's really well established and defined. It's not just saying, a free for all. It's very structured and provides a really comprehensive approach to school counseling, which is why we really want all of our school counselors to implement our new framework that includes each of this so that we're no longer just doing things for fun. Okay, so let's talk about where to begin. And again, we want school counselors to be the experts in this, and they can come to you with their ideas of where to begin. But I keeps wanting to do that. I wanted to share with you some steps of where to begin as well. So I will. Okay, so when we implement our comprehensive school counseling framework, we always want to remind school counselors and administrators that it needs to be implemented one step at a time. This isn't one of those things that we just start in August and we're done by May. It's more of a process than that, just like most things within a school. But the other thing to remember is that while we want to do this one step at a time, any step towards comprehensive school counseling is going to better serve our students. And so we don't want, because it is a process, we don't want people to be scared away because any step is a good step. There are a couple of pieces that I think are great first steps. So if you want to work with your school counselors to begin with these steps, these are some great places to start. This link, which is what was trying to pop up on me just a second ago, is a program audit. It just shows where you are, what pieces are already in place, and maybe none are, and that's okay, but it'll give you a little bit of an idea of where to start. The use of time tool is also a great place to start. This is a way for a school counselor to track their time and show if they're spending their time in the right areas, if they're not, what are the barriers, that sort of thing. When we think about use of time, we say we want school counselors to spend 80% of their time in direct and indirect student services, and then 20% doing that more program planning, fair share duties, things like that. But this can help you figure out where you are along with that program audit. It's a great place to start. The other really good place to start is what we call the annual administrative conference. It's really just a principal and school counselor meeting, but it includes a document, a template for you to work through several of the really important pieces of comprehensive school counseling. So it's a great way to just have a structured conversation about what your plans are for the year, where you're going, what why you're going there, what does the data say, all of those pieces. We really recommend that this meeting happen in August or September. And all of those templates and documents can be found at that link, the use of time, the annual administrative conference, and then many, many more. But these three things, if you can get started on those, you will definitely be started in the right direction, which I highly recommend. And we know it's summer right now, but these are really good. If your school counselor and you as the school leader are on contract before teachers come back, these are 3 things you could do before teachers are even back on contract, which could be really helpful and really help guide your decisions and really help you start out the year on in a great place. Okay, I just wanted to put this up there because I mentioned that use of time. And this is a use of time study that was done. This was actually done with 7,000 school counselors from across the nation. So not just Oklahoma, but across the nation. And this was just done in 2020. So this was post-COVID. And so the data may be skewed a little bit from that, but I think this is super encouraging. And if your data looks anything like this, then we would be pretty we would be pretty excited. I can show you the highs and the lows of this data real quick. So if you see the direct student services for elementary, middle, and high, all are above 50%, which we like. And you can see it's broken up. Direct student services is broken up by counseling, which you know what that is, instruction, which is teaching those preventative lessons, and then appraisal and advisement, that's more the college and career readiness piece, which you can see increases from elementary to high school a little more. But those are great numbers. That means these school counselors, these 7,000 school counselors on average, get to spend about 55% of their time direct face-to-face with students. And then we talked about that indirect piece is really important too, making referrals, consultation, and collaboration. So we wish that the direct and the indirect added up to 80. So you can see in elementary, it's about 75, middle, it's about that too. And so pretty close, not too bad. These red numbers are what we wish would be a little lower. That's those completely non-school counseling tasks, such as testing coordination, covering classes, things that we want to eliminate from school counselors' plates. Just a not good use of your trained mental health and educational professionals. So we want that number to be lower. So this is helpful if you can get your school counselors to track their time. You can compare it to this and see if they're looking about like the national averages. And if you can be even lower in the non-school counseling tasks, you win a gold star for sure. Let me know and I'll highlight you somehow. Okay, so let's keep going. We just have a little bit left, but it's the really important part. So I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time talking about it. So we already talked about the new comprehensive school counseling framework that will be published soon. We'll be doing lots of training and implementation with the publication of it. This link can take you to where you can request professional development. You would just check comprehensive school counseling as the topic, and we could get training in your school or district. We would love to do it free of charge anytime. We also have a SEAL program, which stands for Support for Emergency and Alternatively Licensed School Counselors. And so this will be a training specifically for emergency and alternatively certified school counselors that are in their first 2 years. So if you have a school counselor that fits that, this is going to be an amazing program. We were selected nationally to do a pilot program. We are super excited. Again, completely free of charge, awesome opportunity. Be listening for more details about that coming up. We also plan to create cohorts. So if you're at a rural district or maybe a smaller district that doesn't have other school counselors to work together, then we're going to try to cohort school counselors across districts together so they can have some partners as they implement this new framework. Also, if you don't already get the newsletter updates from the OSDE, I'm sure you get the administrator newsletters, which I'll put some of this information in there. But if you want to sign up for the school-based mental health and counseling newsletter, that's where I provide the most school counseling up-to-date information. And that would probably be really helpful for you too, even though you're not a school counselor, it would still keep you in the know of what's happening. Okay, so here's where I want us to end and where I want you to really think about your role in all of this. So, as a school or district leader, what can you do to help make this happen? So, what I've done is I wanted to address each of those data points that told us they were barriers. So the first one was we heard that high caseloads were a barrier, right? We saw the average in Oklahoma is 411 to 1, and the recommended is 250 to 1. So reflect on what is your school counselor ratio? And if it's above 250 to 1, what could you do to work on lowering that? I created a funding sources document that talks about how you could use some funding to help lower the ratio. You also might think about some of your CARES or ESSER funds and see if you could use any of those. Another thing you could do, and that funding sources document talks about not only how you could use it to lower the school counselor ratio, but it also talks about ways you could buy curriculums like we talked about, or other supports for the role of the school counselor. So that's a great document that could help you maybe brainstorm some ways to address the barrier of high caseloads. The second barrier was that school counselors said that administrators and other leaders don't understand the appropriate role of the school counselor. So as a school leader, I challenge you to reflect on how could you increase your knowledge on the appropriate role of the school counselor. Well, you're here, so you did that. So that's a thumbs up. But what else could you do? Like I said, you're not expected to know this. You likely didn't study it in school, but how could you increase your knowledge? There is a NASP, is the National Association for Secondary School Principals. If you're familiar with that organization, they wrote a great article about just this, school counselors and principals working together. I encourage you to read that. It's an easy read. The College Board also created a toolkit. It's a little bit outdated. I get to partner with some organizations that are working on a new toolkit nationwide. But this one is still really good. Just some of the research might be a little outdated, but there are some great documents and conversation starters of how to work through really creating a strong working relationship with principals and school counselors. There's also a great just one-page document that talks about 10 characteristics of an effective school counselor principal relationship. Great thing just to keep in mind as you look forward to ways you can form a tighter bond and work together better. Okay, so then that third barrier that school counselors stated that said that it's hard for school counselors if they don't receive training on best practices and comprehensive school counseling. So I encourage you to reflect on how could I, as a school leader, help my school counselor receive that appropriate training. So like I said, you can request free professional development from us, and that link is there again. You could potentially use that funding sources document to look at ways to pay for ASCA is the Oklahoma School Counselor Association, and ASCA is the American School Counselor Association. If you could pay for your school counselors' memberships in there, that would be really fantastic, amazing professional development opportunities that come free once you're a member. Or you could use the funding to pay for conference registrations for either of those conferences. Our school counselors so often don't get targeted school counseling training. And so we really need to give them opportunities for professional development that is catered towards them. Same for funding for books or other curriculum and resources. Like I said, that funding document's really important. We wouldn't send a math teacher into the classroom without a curriculum. So we really shouldn't for our school counselors either. Or you could consider contracting with a trainer or a coach. I know some school districts, Edmond Public Schools is doing this right now. And these trainers and coaches can work directly with your school or district. And I linked to that information as well. And then the next barrier that we heard from school counselors is those non-counseling duties. So having to do a vast amount of duties, testing, covering classes. So my challenge is for you to reflect on how could you work with your school counselor to eliminate some of those duties so that they're able to spend more of their time directly serving students. And that use of time tools, a great way to start that conversation. And I talked about that earlier and linked to that as well. And then that last barrier was that people without school counseling degrees are filling school counselor positions. And we see this with teachers too. The emergency certification in Oklahoma has skyrocketed, and it does create a barrier. So what I encourage you to do is to really reflect on when you're hiring for a school counselor, how can you hire the most qualified candidate? I linked here to some amazing interview questions. We shouldn't be asking the same questions that we ask teachers, right? We want to ask school counseling specific questions. So this is a great link. And maybe even inviting people to the interview that understand the role can help. So we know there's those 5 major barriers, and I hope that these give you some ideas of what your role could be in helping to lessen the impact of those barriers. And I know we are out of time, so I think I've reached the end. This is my contact information again. You can call or text that number. That's my email, and I'm super responsive. If you can send me an email, I'm very happy to help in any way. I also linked to just a couple of resources. Like I mentioned, if you have funding to buy some books or resources for school counselors, these 3 are by far my biggest suggestions, especially if you have an MTSS school. This Making MTSS Work is amazing. Making Data Work to help us make sure we're doing that data-informed decision-making. And then that first one's the model that we've talked about throughout this presentation. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about how you can work with your school counselor to meet the needs of all students. And mostly, thank you for the work you do. It is such a big job, and it is not lost on me how hard it is to be a school leader right now. So thank you for your dedication. Thank you for the time and energy you are pouring into our students. And I am just so grateful, so appreciative. And I hope you have a great rest of your conference. Thank you.